Welcome to Empowering Humility, where we're on a mission to promote human flourishing by restoring humility as a common denominator in society today. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Empowering Humility podcast. I'm Giancarlo Newsome, and I'll be your host for this podcast. I'm thrilled to have Brindon and Megasley with me. Guys, it's funny, each time I do these podcasts, I'm like, okay, this is going to be the best one yet, but I don't mean to be offensive to all our past guests, but I really think this one will be the best one yet. And matter of fact, I just heard that Brindon, congratulations, is the 12th most impactful Bitcoiner in Africa. And I heard that is part of Megasley's organization that you're going to meet that helps, that assesses all these great talents that are helping bring Bitcoin and freedom coin. That's what a lot of my friends like to call it. Freedom and responsibility coin, right? It's not like the crypto coins, to Africa. And I think our guests are going to be blessed with the amazing work you're doing. So, so today I'm going to give kind of a long intro. So Brindon, Megasley, you guys have kind of seen this intro, but I think it's important to frame for our guests how important the work you're doing is. Does that sound good?
Yep, very important.
Awesome. And it was fun, by the way, to our audience. It was, before we got on, it was fun to watch Brindon and Megasley argue, trying to push credit back and forth. So as you know, with the Empowering Humility podcast, we're all about empowering humility, and it was fun to watch them live out humility. And I hope their example that I just shared, that we'll all embrace that we'll be fighting at trying to get in a small door, that we as humans really grow our ability to outcompete our humility and to give credit and share credit. So anyhow, kudos to you guys for that. So let me frame our discussion today. Today, we are going to learn how Bitcoin, built on blockchain technology, is empowering humility and livelihoods like never before in Africa. You will be inspired today, I promise. Blockchain technology, by the way, for those who don't know, is a component of what people have defined as Web3 technology. And for those that don't know, okay, what's Web3? Well, Web3 helps us restore our individual agency and personal responsibility to our individual data and control. So when you think about it today, we live in a Web2 world, which is a lot like communism, which misleads us to believe we get all these services for free, which is not true. We are paying them. We're paying them with our data. And our data includes our minds, our emotions. So we're giving ourselves to other people for free, for them to frankly exploit us, and oftentimes without our knowledge. So that's why Bitcoin and blockchain technology, by US standards, not, as you can imagine, countries that live by authoritarian standards have a much different use case for wanting to use blockchain technology or crypto. So today we're going to hear the differences about why Bitcoin is so important, it's so liberating, so empowering, and why it's something everyone needs to study, because as we went from the horses to cars, that is exactly what's happening in the financial sector. We're going from horses to cars. It's just a little harder to get our heads around. But today you have two young people that will help make that transition that much easier. Finally, I've mentioned this on all our podcasts, all of our guests embody being selfless servants. And I think you'll pick up on that they are mission over me ethos. So it's a real honor to have them. I can't wait for you guys to get to know them. And does that sound like, am I setting things up good for you guys, Brindon, Megasley? Excellent. All right, I'm getting some vertical nods. Okay, so let me get things set up here. We all know there's no shortage of social media and artificial intelligence, AI, that exploits our vices and human weakness for profit. And sadly, most of the time, this big money and big tech, like the tobacco industry back in the day, exploits us without our knowledge, at least as long as they can, for as long as they can get away from it, get away with it. And we know that is catching up to them, right? Jonathan Haidt, who wrote the book, The Anxious Generation, Tristan Harris, if you haven't seen the documentary Social Dilemma, we now have the data that shows how, as they quietly take advantage of us, the impact, the harsh consequences is very real. So take that picture and say, okay, how has the financial big tech world taken also advantage of us? And how can we get that individual power and responsibility and freedom back? Today, you're going to learn about that. So I want you also look at this Web3, Web2, big tech. Look at them like Pornhub. Most of us recognize that Pornhub is really bad for us. Most of us recognize that lust is kind of a gross abuse of natural biology, right? But there are other natural biologies that also hurt us. And think about Facebook. Think of the way they exploit envy, or they exploit even junk food, right? In a way, Facebook is a form of human trafficking. It's trafficking our emotions to each other for financial gain, just like a human trafficker. So I know that sounds harsh, but it's really not hyperbole. And this is why I hope this conversation helps us all go deeper, empowering our own humility, so then we can take action and take agency and restore our own individual responsibility and freedom back. That's being taken over, being trafficked by others. Another really kind of important thing I want to highlight about the junk food the mental junk food we're consuming, of greed. You think about it, we've never had our feelings of inadequacy reinforced more. But think about it, we are wealthier materially more than all of human history. We're on a call connected between Uganda, Nigeria, and Italy right now. We all have phones that have more power than any of our generations behind us had. So, we were having some internet connections, and we were kind of, Brindon was talking about the difference of like internet connection, but still, even in Africa, we're exceptionally wealthy. And we've got to stop the influences that tell us that we're not. And now we need to kind of use all this blessing for good. And this is what you're going to hear that Megasley and Brindon do. So anyhow, we are becoming morally obese, if you think about it, at a moral level. And the circle of people that are enriching themselves from our suffering and our indiscipline is growing. And so the purpose of e-humility is to be like a fitness gym to help us basically become fit and deal with our moral obesity. I also want to bring to bear therapy culture and how mental health care, or better it should be called keep us sick care, is our greatest corporate medical expense. But Giancarlo, Facebook is how grandma keeps up with me and my kids and our busy lives. I would say, listen to yourself, be humble. Doesn't this affirm that your busy life to some degree is more important than your grandmother? So stop doom scrolling, go and visit or call grandma. So now let's talk about this tech-enabled evil. Like most evil, just like our excuse to say Facebook's healthy because we can talk to grandma, masquerades as light and good intentions. And his corruption with us is so subtle that it goes unnoticed until it is too late, until your grandmother's gone, until your marriage is destroyed, right? Until you desire things so much that you've lost your freedom and you've consumed in your own envy, right? Or your materialism. So now let's pivot to Africa. While it is not fueled by big tech like the West, I don't think a continent on Earth has suffered more from the tyranny and exploitation of good intentions like Africa. I find it fun that today's guests are, though, using tech to jam sticks in the wheels of this evil of unaccountable good intentions. If you think about all the tech we've talked about so far, there's always the thread of good intentions. Talk to grandma, right? Or, hey, we make it easy for you to have a centralized banking system, right? So there's unaccountable good intentions is what is hurting us. So today you will meet and learn from our amazing guests who are using tech that by design requires and reinforces and enforces strict moral and monetary discipline, or maybe we can call it moral fitness in monetary exchange. Today, you will get a glimpse into how these young men in the ecosystems they represent are employing Bitcoin to counter the stark polarity of starvation and moral obesity of today's monetary systems in Africa. Many who don't have food in Africa also don't have a bank. There's the bank and the unbanked. We don't talk about that in the West. We see the starving people. We don't talk about, how about the people that are starving for like just basic financial infrastructure? So these sticks will not only help stop the wheels of corruption that is undermining the good that is behind all the undermining good intentions of past aid to Africa. If you think about it, all aid to Africa has the road to hell, good intentions in it. But their tech and moral leadership gives me hope that these young Africans are also setting the example and leading the world in restoring moral and virtuous fitness. I was telling Brindon and Megasley, it's my opinion, as someone who lives in the West, that the hope of the world actually rests in Africa. These young men, when you hear their story, they absolutely value freedom like we do, but unlike the West, they haven't disconnected personal responsibility from that freedom. And I think when you hear how they employ Bitcoin, it represents freedom that we all believe in, but it also enforces personal responsibility. So I'll let them expand upon that some more. Anyhow, I believe these young men are the catalyst for bringing a global level of moral fitness that will restore human flourishing to the world as God designed. So with that intro, I am super excited to introduce to you Brindon and Megasley, and we're going to discuss, humility and money, Africa and the gift of Bitcoin. Welcome, Brindon and Megasley, to the Empowering Humility podcast.
Yeah.
Tell about that, guys.
Thank you very much.
What are your top of mind thoughts with that intro? And either one of you guys can go first. I'm just curious to hear what came to mind as I was giving that intro. See, they're being humble again. It's like, Brindon, you go first. You go first.
He's looping me in.
Brindon, go ahead. Go ahead.
There is so much packed in that intro, but for me, for anyone who is just tuning in, I would ask them to put on their mental track shoes, because the background you've said is exactly what the truth is. There's a lot that is going on when it comes to the mental obesity, as you called it. There is culture dilution at the expense of technology. The fundamental example you used of talking to grandma at the cost of all these things, you doom scrolling, losing yourself in a feed that is not true, watching actors, independent actors, as I like to call them, present to you on social media and you falling for it and thinking that you are not at your best. This conversation is going to be interesting, but top of mind, very good background, explains what I hope to also get from this discussion from Megasley and yourself. The most interesting thing you might want to remember as you get into the discussion is Africa is actually working at a disadvantage, because whatever has worked in the Western world is trying to be pushed on the African continent. And it is forces like Bitcoin, it is forces like free will, it is forces like education, not in the traditional sense, but financial empowerment and emotional empowerment that are kind of countering this narrative. So Megasley and I have the opportunity to be, I wouldn't want to say at the forefront of the revolution, but we are part of that revolution that is trying to stop these forces in their ways. So maybe let's hear what Megasley has to say.
I love it. I just mental track shoes, audience, get them on. Let's also be transparent with the independent actors that want to maybe impose ways that have hurt us in the West and Africa, and make sure we don't do that. And Megasley, what are your, matter of fact, what are your top of mind thoughts? But go ahead and also just, after you kind of share your top of mind thoughts and hopes for this audience, Tell us a little bit about your backstory and like your why, how you got into Bitcoin and what was your orange pill moment.
Yeah, thank you so much, Giancarlo. Again, I hope the way I'm pronouncing the name is correct.
You did
And
great.
of course, awesome. Of course, my boss, Brindon, has already said most of the things I wanted to say about that intro.
But he called you the
And the only
boss.
thing, it was a mistake from him anyways. He is the boss. But then I think the one thing I would actually like to add to that is that the way people in the West see Africa and Africans is very different from what is actually happening, right? You understand? On ground, there are lots of things you mentioned, and sometimes you see people trying to bring solutions to problems in Africa, and then the way they are actually trying to bring the solution is not exactly how it's supposed to be, because they are not really based in Africa to see what the problems are and to actually have like a better insight and understanding as to how to like bring those solutions to it. But everything you've said and is actually on point, and Brandon has actually made justice to that already. But let me just jump right into my backstory. Mine is always a little bit funny as to how I came into Bitcoin and why I actually got into Bitcoin. It was I've actually not been in the space for too long. I got into Bitcoin, I'd say, fully in 2022. But I have heard about Bitcoin a long time before then. I actually got scammed when I tried investing in Bitcoin. That was the very first time I ever bought some Bitcoin. But it ended up the scam actually, and I lost money. It wasn't big money anyways, but then I was a student, so it was a big deal. But then I how I got the opportunity to actually come into the Bitcoin space, even know about Bitcoin for what Bitcoin is. It was in 2021 when I actually applied for a job. It wasn't a Bitcoin job, but they required a tech role, and it was an internship role. Fortunately for me, I made it through like 4 different stages of the interview. And in the last stage of the interview, I remember the interviewer asking me if I am happy to be paid in Bitcoin. I'm happy to receive my salary in Bitcoin. And obviously, I was like, yeah, of course. And he then went ahead to ask if I know anything about Bitcoin. At the time, I only knew Bitcoin to be just a cryptocurrency. And I didn't want to blow my chances of getting the job. So I just went ahead to say yes, even though I didn't know much about Bitcoin at the time. And fortunately for me, I got the job and I started working. Now, when you're working with people that understand Bitcoin and then they are always talking about Bitcoin, I remember I was given a task while at the job as an intern to curate a Bitcoin course for the my team members, basically. Um, Mind you, this was not a Bitcoin company at all, had nothing connected to Bitcoin. But the people in charge actually understood Bitcoin and they wanted the employees to also learn about Bitcoin. So it was when I got that task to curate the course, that's when I went deep to actually understand what Bitcoin is. I remember the first site I made on YouTube. It was Antonopolis that came up. I don't know if I got the name correct. Brandon, right? He speaks a lot about Bitcoin. And I think that was the very first video I watched. He kind of like broke Bitcoin down, explained how things work. And then I got deeper. I read about lots of things because I was curating the course. That's actually curating the course. I needed to really understand Bitcoin very well. And then I got to a point where I finally realized what Bitcoin was. But even then, I still did not have as much interest because, the interest was just curate the course. It was a task that was given to you, curate the course and then complete your task. And you didn't want to blow it. But
Yeah.
I, yeah. So After that opportunity, something happened that we had to kind of like leave the company. And then that was when I met my team, my current team at African Bitcoiners. We kind of like came together. Actually, we have someone who is very, very passionate about seeing Bitcoin grow in Africa. And she actually was the one that recruited us, myself and two other team members. So we were three in total. And then we came into the space. And then I remember in the beginning, she actually bombarded us with a lot of materials, right? A lot of Bitcoin related materials, lots of Bitcoin related courses, to go through. And we basically spent a whole month to study about Bitcoin. Just a whole full month reading, watching, taking tests, everything that is connected to Bitcoin and taking all the courses we can. We got some certificates within that period of time. But the beautiful thing about that journey was that within that 1 month, we were able to know a lot about Bitcoin than most people that have been in the space for a very long time. And not just that we knew about Bitcoin, we also got to see Bitcoin for what Bitcoin really is, right? And then from then, that's when we started the journey of actually, letting other people know, because just like in Christian, the Christian kingdom, where you learn about Jesus and you want to also talk to other people about it. I'm sorry, I love my faith a lot, so I used to always bring this. So that's the same way with Bitcoin. You realize the power that Bitcoin had and how much of the potential, which was the most important part of it, the changes it could actually bring to us as Africans, coming from a place like my country, which is Nigeria, where you have one of the worst currencies. And of course, the people, the governments are not really helping matters in terms of curbing inflation. So our currency is really, really inflated. And then you get to see Bitcoin acting the opposite way. And I think when it comes to Bitcoin, the part where I am always most passionate about is the part where you get to tell the people, especially the people in my country, let them see that, especially when it has to do with savings, let them see that saving money in their currency, in our currency, is basically just them killing the value they have. So that was where the major passion actually aroused from. Letting people see Bitcoin for what Bitcoin is, let them see the potential it carries and how much change it can actually bring to their financial lives. And even in the future, there are lots of people saving for their kids in the future. I know a lot of them. And then these people are putting their money in Naira. And then when you look at the way the Naira has been going, deflation, sorry, excuse me, has been going inflation wise, you quickly just realize that these people are only doing this. They are actually doing more harm to themselves, but then they are only doing it because they do not know about Bitcoin. So that's when we started the journey of teaching, basically educating people about Bitcoin, letting them see it for what it is, that it's not just a cryptocurrency. And of course, trying as much as possible to bring as many people as we can into the system. So that's where we started African Bitcoiners. And like I said, the story where I said someone recruited us, where I meet my team member, that is actually the team, the African Bitcoiners team he formed at the time. And the rest has actually been story. From then, we went on to, State of Africa pre-routing. And Africa pre-routing initially started as, we had the initial plan of running Lightning nodes, pre-routing Lightning nodes to support Africa generally, because when we looked at the map at the time, I mean, there are lots of Lightning nodes in other continents, but in Africa, it was really, really scanty. There was little to nothing going on as far as Lightning was concerned, and in terms of Lightning nodes as well. So we decided to go on a journey to, build and run Lightning nodes in Africa that are actually resident in Africa. So we can also light up the map as well too. And we did not just run the nodes, but we made them free routing in the sense that payments that goes through our node, we didn't charge anything for it. So they were basically just payments going around with zero fees. And from there, we went on to, run Lightning Developer Bootcamps, which is what is actually it has actually been gaining a lot of traction so far. We've gone to different cities, and the whole idea is to train developers, because at the end of the day, when you talk about adoption, if you just keep going to people to tell them, hey, this is Bitcoin, this is what Bitcoin can do, and you need to come into Bitcoin, it's not really going to be as effective as it would have been if you're going there with like a product that actually solves a problem. And then you let them see these products. After explaining everything, you let them know this was actually made possible because of Bitcoin. And in order to have such products, we need to have builders, we need to have developers that are thinking and are building solutions that are also tailored to, the problems that we face in Africa in general. So that's how we started the Lightning Developer Bootcamps, to train developers on how to build on Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. And also we help businesses as well to set up Lightning payments. Business that wants to accept Bitcoin payments, we help them set it up. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think I've actually taken a lot of time.
Fantastic. And actually, I'll play in. I'm a fellow Christian brother with you now at Empowering Humility. We value everyone's diversity of faith, because we feel we all are seeking after God. Hopefully, it's truth, empowering humility. So us sharing our faith doesn't impose it, but we openly share it. But I want to play into our shared faith, because you mentioned you teach the value of Bitcoin, right? Just with the same passion you talk about Jesus. But at some point, we can't just talk about Jesus. We have to act. We have to build something. We have to do something. The scripture says faith without works is dead. And I feel very much, as we've talked about it on other podcasts, how much of the Western church is a dead faith. There's not works, a lot of talk. So I admire how you are not only teaching the gospel of Bitcoin, the value, the transcendental value, just like Jesus, but you're also teaching people how to develop the framework. Also, even in government and legislation, there's a lot of great policy, especially as you know, a reservist in the military. How often do we hear great, beautiful policies, but people don't build the systems and information technology to make those beautiful policies or frameworks easy and available for everyone? So I admire that a lot. I was going to, I think it's great that, Brindon, tell your backstory, but also I thought of you because you've been a great mentor to me in that, we'll also talk about circular economies. I learned about that when I met you guys both at the Plan B, but how those are best seated with someone who begins to pay people in Bitcoin. So your story, Megasley, how it's not that you were looking for Bitcoin, is you were looking for a job. And the fact that someone said they would pay you in Bitcoin makes you go, well, maybe I should learn about it. Your story also tells something very important for empowering humility fitness is even if we're involved in something meaningful, let's say going to church on paper is very meaningful, but we have to humble ourselves to truly step back and go, okay, what's the true purpose behind it? Because we can just check the box, right? It's very interesting. You told me, if I understood correctly, you built a course to teach on Bitcoin, but it didn't become real to you. Kind of like a lot of people who come to faith, something tragic or something has to be that moment where it goes, oh, this is more than just checking a box, getting a certificate. And then I think you look at the failure of the United States college education system, how many poor people from hubris, not through humility, got degrees, spent a lot of money that were worthless. So I think lots of lessons there. Boy, Megasley, thank you so much. Brindon, tell us about your story and teach us maybe about circular economies, please.
Megasley is a beneficiary of a circular economy. One person who chose to pay Bitcoin forward. I think I've become a very big advocate of spending Bitcoin, because if we do not spend Bitcoin, we miss the opportunity to to show by action, to show by doing. I'll start from the back. 2016, I am in high school. I genuinely want to make money online. And I go online and I type how to make money online. And for me, what I found was paid ad viewing. So 2016 was the peak of Facebook ads and most Google-based ads. So there was a website where I think the unnecessary traffic was being routed to for people like me, people who are looking to make some quick money, to go on there and fabricate clicks. So we were fabricating clicks of adverts. So we were being paid to view adverts. I did that, and every click would earn you 1 cent. You would look at images, so images that are being advertised by, I don't know, whoever, and you'd look at those images, and below those images, there were digits attached. You'd have to type those digits out, and every time you click enter, I hope, or I'm thinking, that would look like a click on the other side, on the person who paid for the ads. So every click would be worth 1 cent. And from the time I discovered that website, I worked day and night, clicked enough times to hit $1,000. And by the end of the week, as per the clicks I had made on the website, I had $1,000. I had not held even $100 in my hands. So I was like, this is my opportunity to become rich. As you can imagine, $1,000 in high school is a lot of money. So I prepare myself to be rich. I go cash out. So when I click cash out, they're like, do you have a bank card? Do you have a bank account where we can send this money? Of course, I was still below age, and I didn't have a bank account to my name. I didn't have a Visa card, so I could not receive the money. I didn't know how to use MoneyGram. But all the way to the bottom, there was an option called Bitcoin. It was the only thing that I did not know about. And I was like, what is Bitcoin thing? So I've grown on the internet. I like to call myself raised by YouTube. So I went to YouTube. I'm like, what is Bitcoin? So I find out what Bitcoin is, and I realized it was fully online. It required no identification, which I will circle back to, and the importance of the absence of identification in financial inclusion. So I then get down in the rabbit hole of how do I receive money using Bitcoin? I eventually figure it out. I find my way to a Bitcoin wallet. I download it, wrote down my seed phrase on a plain piece of paper, which I don't recommend people doing because I lost that piece of paper after. So then I feed the wallet address into the website. And they're like, aha, so you figured out Bitcoin. Now you have to test your Bitcoin address by sending us Bitcoin. Back then, I'm like, maybe Bitcoin works like that.
Oh, no.
I thought maybe Bitcoin works like that. I mean, they asked for about $10. I'm like, $10 to a ratio of 1,000. I go back to YouTube, how to buy Bitcoin. So I land on a website called Local Bitcoins. I am able to get my way around buying some Bitcoin. So I got a total of about $14 into the Bitcoin wallet that I'd created. I sent them, I will never forgive them. I sent them $10 worth of Bitcoin, and I remained with about $2 because I think I spent on transaction fees and everything. So then I wait. I'm like, oh, $1,000, let's go. $1,000, let's go. That holiday ended. I went back, finished high school. Up to now, I still check my wallet. I've never received $1,000. But the wallet that I retained, where I had the $2, I also didn't touch it. So for about 2 or 3 years, I did not do anything with that $2 that was stayed in the wallet. And when I came back to it, when I kept standing to check if the $1,000 was there, I found over a longer period of time that this money had actually tripled, doubled or tripled. And I thought to myself, so instead of trying to go and click on some random website which does not pay on time. Shouldn't I just buy money, find a bunch of money, buy Bitcoin, keep it, it doubles, I become a millionaire. That was the new strategy. So then I get into the world of buying a bit of Bitcoin, but then I become more curious because the doubling effect really brought me. It's a very common factor in the Bitcoin space that most people come for the money and stay for the principles and the potential. So I came in to make a bunch of money and I got looked in. So I started doing research. I started engaging on Twitter. I made a lot of friends. By, I think, 2019, I was confident enough. I up and spoke to my friend. I'm like, but there's this Bitcoin thing. I put my $2, they became $4. I had at that point put other monies, and in 2019 they had slightly gone up. I told him, so this is the strategy. We are young men, we don't like overworking. We are going to go look for money, start businesses, look for money, put that money in Bitcoin, and just wait. That was the strategy. So I got to teach him what I had learned, but he also asked me a lot of questions that got me back to researching and getting in detail. So fast forward, after him learning and I learned, we bought Bitcoin. Now in 2020, after the break of COVID, the Bitcoin price shot up drastically. And for us, we made a bit of money and we were like, okay, so if we are rich, how about our friends? So we got the idea of if we teach people about Bitcoin, maybe they can pay us some money for the knowledge we will share. They will put that money in Bitcoin, but they will also get to learn about Bitcoin. Yeah, so I think that's how we birthed our first education organization. At that point, of course, as most initial people are, you get corrupted by crypto because Bitcoin is a bit, the number is, it looks big. It looks like you're buying a whole mansion. But I ended up touching to a bit of crypto. I got to understand what blockchain is in detail. I got to start to teach people about crypto and Bitcoin in general. But something very important happened in 2021. I got through to the signal. I like to call it signal. I met a couple of people online who called me out. They said, Brindon, you're very energetic. You know how to teach. You know how to speak. You know how to communicate these ideas simply. Why are you wasting time teaching people about crypto? It was not until they pointed it out that I realized that all the cryptos I had discovered over the years, some of them had either crashed and they were non-existent, or they were heading down that path.
Yeah.
But of course, you are stubborn a bit, so I hesitated. I was getting a few offers from majority of the exchanges to teach locally here. So I've worked closely with Binance. I worked closely with FTX. But what put the nail in the coffin was we had just started our partnership with FTX, I think by like 2 months, and we were doing education on the ground on their behalf, and FTX collapsed.
Wow.
Now, when FTX collapsed,
with your story, wow, you were wrapped up in the FTX story. Wow.
Yeah. So when FTX collapsed, we had a few of our friends we had taught come back to us and say, okay, I had $20, I had 100. You guys brought me to this thing. When is it coming back? So then everything made sense. I'm like, if I want to build the next 20 years, at that point, I had actually decided that we were going to stay in the Bitcoin space. If I'm going to run a career for my lifetime in this space, I can't be vouching, I can't be putting to my name projects that won't exist in those 20 years. Otherwise, I will be the greatest scammer of all time. So in 2021 late, I think early 2022, we took a very bold movement. We decided we were going to close the old crypto company, which was Skillhaven, and we transitioned to a Bitcoin-only stance. Now, within that space, a lot was happening. I was making new connections online. I was getting bigger offers from the crypto space. So it was very counterintuitive for me to say no, for me to actually refuse to take up all these easy money that crypto projects were offering me at the expense of Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't have a marketing team. Most companies will not come to pay you to do the Bitcoin work. But for the long-term perspective of I want to build in this space, I had to take the liberty and the due diligence and do the work. So that's when we built Gorilla Sats, which became a Bitcoin-only platform. We started out with the same thing we were doing in the previous company. We started doing education. And every time we received an offer from a crypto project, however tempting it was, we refused to take the offer. So along the way, of course, we lost a co-founder. Initially in the company that we had started, the crypto one, we had gotten a few co-founders. We stayed the two of us. When we started the Bitcoin only mission, we made a public letter. We posted on Twitter. We said, guys, we have detached from crypto. Going forward, we're a Bitcoin only company. All our efforts will be Bitcoin only. And there was a lot of noise around it. People don't like general crypto space does not believe that people who become Bitcoin only are good for the space. But I think that's the best decision we ever took, because from that time, it has always been impact, and we've not lost that progress in any collapse or anything. So Gorilla Sats picks up. Of course, we added the aspect of tourism, because in the last few years, we'd had a few Bitcoiners come to visit, and we'd managed their logistics, where they stayed, what they saw in terms of tourism, how they experienced the country. So we decided to blend Gorillas, which is the tourism, and Sats, which is Satoshis, to create the first Bitcoin tourism company on the continent. We were the first, and it went well. We actually did some good work. We were educating around the biggest university in Uganda, and that's where the circular economy nugget drops in. So we are already an established Bitcoin tourism company. We know our fundamentals, but we've not really put a structure to the way we educate people, to the way we were creating the community. We were just teaching. And the moment you start teaching, you lose an ingredient, you lose practicality. Just like my Bitcoin pastor, Megasley, said, when you're teaching Bitcoin, you have to add a bit of evangelism, door to door, drag people to fellowships. So I was able to interact with someone online who was calling for anyone in the African region interested in building a Bitcoin circular economy. I remember I was not quick to respond to that because I did not know what it was. But I told you guys, I come from YouTube University. So I go to YouTube. What is a Bitcoin circular economy? So I get the whole concept. Actually, after reading a few of the documents and watching some of the videos, I realized we were already building a Bitcoin circular economy. We were just missing a few pieces. So then I go back to Twitter and I pitched. This was to the person who now is my mentor. He's called Haman. He was also in Lugano. I pitched. I wanted to build a circular economy around the biggest university in Uganda. And I already had efforts that were going on. We'd already taught a few students. We'd already put Bitcoin in some of their wallets. But we had not completed the cycle, which is very important for people who want to teach or learn about Bitcoin. We were stopping at giving them Bitcoin. We had not yet completed the curve for them to see it being spent, for them to see it being turned into day-to-day services. So I pitched that, and I won a ticket to go to Prague, Czech Republic. And of course, I did not have money because it was a very short notice thing. I won the ticket to attend a conference, but there was a flight in between. So because I'd been doing all this work and I'd come out publicly to say I'm going to be a Bitcoin only, when I put up a campaign for people to support me using Bitcoin, for me to travel to Europe, that campaign filled up in one day and I needed about $2,000 to travel. So all these Bitcoiners online had been watching the kind of effort and devotion we had put into growing the community. And they immediately sponsored me, and I took my first plane, my first trip out of Africa and my first visit to Europe, thanks to Bitcoin and thanks to the work we've been doing. And when I reached Prague, it was learning about circular economies. I met very interesting people. I met the big name Bitcoiners. I met people who had sent me sats from across the world. Some of them had attended the conference. And for me, when I came back from that conference, it was, how do I replicate what these people have already found out? So we picked up the Bitcoin circular economy model and we started building the first Bitcoin circular economy in Uganda, which we called Bitcoin Kampala, Uganda. The Kampala is because it was around the university. The Uganda is because we eventually took on a project that looks after 115 orphans now using Bitcoin, and it is out of the city. So we started in the city and we expanded out. So we started doing that, and for me, that immediately showed me what we'd been missing. We were able to get merchants around the university. So every time we taught people at the university, every time we taught people around the university, the Bitcoin would put into their wallets as a demo. They could go buy a juice, they could go buy a snack, they could buy some airtime, they could buy perfume. So it was instantly money. And majority of the people here whom we've taught about Bitcoin, they look at it as money first, not as a store of value, not as my initial thoughts of trying to double my wealth. They look at it as money. And on the other side of the orphanage, we interact with an orphanage where we have 115 children who either way required donations. So we created a platform for them to receive donations using Bitcoin. Now, the ingredient that we added at the orphanage is, because it's a big concentration of children and their caretakers, we started talking to the suppliers of the orphanage, we started talking to the service providers of the orphanage to be able to pay them in Bitcoin. It took a long time, but because we were their major source of income, we were their biggest client, it was an easy negotiation. It's like, you don't have to do it now, but gradually as we grow, we are going to receive more Bitcoin donations. So if you don't take Bitcoin, you are defeating the whole purpose of us receiving Bitcoin donations in terms of transaction fees and having to convert. So we gave them enough time to adjust to the new innovation that we were taking on. And boy, oh boy, that started the whole revolution. Like between 2023 and now, all our expenses at the orphanage, except when we buy petrol or any form of gasoline, and the online services where we can't pay for Bitcoin, more than 95% of our expenses are being paid in Bitcoin. We reached an extent where the school where the children go to accepted Bitcoin for tuition. So, and then now that has grown into supporting other circular economies on the continent. It has grown into delivering all these lessons to the world through the keynotes, kind of like the one where we met in Lugano, where we're talking about entrepreneurship. Because if you look at the whole story behind what has happened, it's just an entrepreneur trying to find a way out for himself and in turn impacting this whole community. So that's my story. I've cut out a lot of details, like how I've still not yet received my $1,000, but I will not forget.
I love it. Outstanding. Thanks, Brindon. I love that. It is just a way for an entrepreneur to find a way out. But what you mentioned is really cool. It's not just for the entrepreneur. It helps build a community. I think that was one of my takeaways from the Plan B conference where we met in Switzerland. And so for our audience to know, Lugano, Switzerland is a city in Switzerland that is basically kind of like El Salvador. So El Salvador is, I think, probably the most popular, most well-known circular economy. If you search Bitcoin Beach, it kind of was one of the first models. But Lugano has kind of taken that from a Swiss standpoint, and the Swiss are like arguably the world leader in financial freedom and independence, right? So it's very interesting. Lugano, they host a conference called Plan B, but when I went, it literally was the most meaningful conference I've been a part of. There was no checking the box. It was truly meeting people like both of you that are truly committed to this vision. And so that there's more than just the practical side of the community, right? Exchanging things. We kind of restore that analog connection, which is very interesting. We're restoring analog connection through a digital technology, which is a very interesting paradox. I also loved how you mentioned, the e-humility project. We have every week at the University of North Carolina some teams that are promoting our fitness app. And so I think it's interesting also how you are at the place of academia, planting these seeds, helping people taste what it is. And I thought it was interesting how you both mentioned two values of Bitcoin that, and the importance of making it circular by not only it being a good store of value, like Megasley mentioned, how the inflation is really out of control, where in 1 year, 2 years, there's almost 200% inflation, which means that, what you could buy this year, you can only buy half as much the next year. It's horrible. And even in the US, though, so in the past 90 years, I recommend someone called Michael Saylor. He's probably the lead corporate investor in Bitcoin. He highlights that over time, our money, basically what you could buy with $100 at the beginning of the century, 100 years ago, now you can't. It's worth $1, right? So it's that inflation is eating away, and if you think about it, it's kind of an undeclared tax. And the other thing too that I wanted to share with the audience, that if you think about all the technology we have, especially with AI and robotics coming about, we should have deflation. The money it costs for you to take a potato out of the ground, to do anything with technology or AI, should come down. The cost of food should come down, but what's happened is just the opposite. So this is what Bitcoin helps defend, keeps it at a local level. But I wanted to ask you guys at a moral level. So your story about FTX is great. It's always fun to I think we all have to face some. One of our phrases at e-humility is be humble or get humbled, right? So sounds like both of you got humbled, right? Megasley, you got scammed with crypto. You got scammed with FTX and were, kind of tied into that, didn't know better. I think we all have been part of people who scammed us. And hopefully we can look in the mirror to make sure that we're not scamming people, right? Because I think it's those small breaches of integrity that collect. And next thing you know, we don't realize that we are actually part of the problem. I think most wolves in the community don't become wolves overnight. So tell me about, what does empowering humility mean to you, and how does Bitcoin and your story reinforce your view of what empowering humility looks like? Megasley, y'all are all being humble, waiting for the other to go. Megasley, you go first.
So if I got you correctly, you're asking what humility means to me and how Bitcoin kind of like helps enforce that. Please give me a minute.
Sure.
Okay, so for me, personally, I think when I think of the word humility, I'm so sorry about that. When I think about the word humility, for me, I often always see it as you as an individual realizing first that you're not really the center of the world. Basically, just understanding that that basic understanding alone kind of like will help you be as humble as you can get. And to some point also, I personally also always tie humility to discipline, right? When you are disciplined enough to know what to do, and you're also disciplined enough to do it, right? Without any excuses, without having to look for other means basically to escape it. So you're disciplined and you do what you're supposed to do at the right time when you're supposed to do it, taking responsibility to me. So that is what I see humility as. And then when you try to connect that back to Bitcoin, you say Bitcoin by way of design kind of like teaches you discipline. You understand? Um, there is no buying your way back. There is no, inflating the price. There's no increasing the value. I'm looking for the best way to put it. Now, with Bitcoin, um, you're 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 disciplined by default, basically, because you can't really do anything to influence it. You know that you have to do some work for some new Bitcoin to come into the world. That's like it when we talk about proof of work in terms of mining, and there is no two ways. So basically, you're forced to abide by that rule of proof of work, basically to get new Bitcoin. And also, if you look at things like self-custody, generally, because Bitcoin is not controlled by any one person or any group of person or any government. It teaches you to be responsible and disciplined as well to take care of or take charge of your funds and of course, your private keys as much as you can. That is, I'm just looking for the best way to put it. I don't know if you guys got what I tried to explain, actually. So that's the part I like to look at when you talk about Bitcoin, connecting Bitcoin to humility, or how Bitcoin kind of like helps enforce humility on my own perspective. Yeah, that is it. Just
Well, I'll throw onto that. Is that you think of the first thing you said with humility is we're not the center of the world. And the way Bitcoin was designed was that no human being can be the center of that crypto. You think a lot of the other crypto projects, there's a human involved, right? So there's some very popular people that have like their meme coin. Now, I feel it's too much power for any individual, or frankly, even a government, right? Because the government's run by a group of people. And we already know that all civilizations have corrupted their monetary supply to support those in power. And that's Bitcoin is a hedge against that, because no one can control it. So that's why it implicitly enforces humility amongst all of us. And if you think about humility, and we talked about this, I think, in the original podcast, there's no basis for valuing someone else's freedom with humility, right? Like, why do I care if you're free if I can control you? I don't care, right? There's no why this trustless system implicitly requires humility. And I loved also how you tied it to discipline. And it's very, very cool. Brindon, what are your thoughts on humility and Bitcoin?
I think the first advantage we have is fundamentally almost everyone who has the chance to interact with Bitcoin existed before the creation of Bitcoin. And the worst thing that you can do to any adult who does not possess humility is to try to teach them something new. So Bitcoin out of the gates presents you with the first barrier. You have to get over your ego to be able to say, oh, the money I've been using ever since I was a child, the money that I was taught is what I need to work for day and night. The money I've used to save and receive value might be corrupted. And for me, that's the first level of humility for everyone that I have met, for them to actually look within themselves and say, this is not the truth. This is not what I have known it to be. And for some of the people, the higher you go in terms of what we call intellectual authority, the lower the humility. So there is something within the Bitcoin space where we say Bitcoin is an intelligence test, it's an ego test, and it's a health test. It's an intelligence test because it looks at your ability to welcome new information, which is a form of intellectual humility, for you to see and identify that information actually transitions and new facts can present themselves, and it is up to you to accept them. Then intellectual humility, and then you spill into the ego test. The ego test sometimes applies mostly to people who are authorities, because the world has been built in forms of structures and Bitcoin has no structure. The structure is actually code. So for most people, especially the big bankers, the big governments, the presidential advisors and people who are in leadership, their ego tends to blind them into thinking that they can supersede the technology like Bitcoin. And the ego test is the biggest test to people of power. People of power tend to lose humility the more power they have. But with Bitcoin, the more power you have, the more humility you possess, because then you realize how out of control you are. Because you only have power over your wallet. You only have power over your wallet address. You only have power over your transaction. You can see what is going on, but you can't do much. That's the kind of humility that Bitcoin introduces. It's kind of the phrase of rules without rulers. So that's where I find the ego test. The health test is on the side of how have we been relating to this thing that we call money? Because money is directly tied to a lot of things. Money is our way of interaction. And if we are spending money to eat, we are spending money to travel, we are spending money to stay fit, if the money we have been using automatically steals from us, isn't that stealing from our health? Isn't that stealing from our sanity? Isn't that stealing from all the things that we think that make us healthy, both in mind and in spirit? So Bitcoin's technological design by default creates humility, but it also creates humility on a group level, because there's been multiple times when the Bitcoin code was attacked by groups of people. So beyond the sovereign individual, there's been examples where countries like China, where countries like the US at some point, where groups of people who thought they had power in the Bitcoin space have been humbled by the small people, as they usually call them. So Bitcoin brings back the principle of love your neighbors, you love yourself. I would like to say it like that. So yourself, as much as capability you have within yourselves to take care of yourself, to take care of your Bitcoin address, it is as much as you contribute to the network. So the more you understand and exercise your Bitcoin knowledge and know-how around the space, the more you protect other users. If I take care of my Bitcoin node, I protect the whole network. If I teach people about Bitcoin, I empower and strengthen the network. If I send sats to someone else, I'm creating volume, I am paying someone who is processing that transaction fees. So there's a lot of reciprocation, which introduces something that we had initially lost as human beings. Having hope that when I do the right thing will manifest in the world, because it has not been that way. It has been sometimes I do the right thing and someone else who is on the next step, or someone who is across the room, chooses to do a wrong thing, and they cause a problem for both of us. If I do the right thing on the Bitcoin space, I have the certainty that that right thing will see through to the whole network. So And Bitcoin, there is the difference between humility and empowering humility. The empowering phrase for me is the architecture of the network. It is always reinforcing equality. It is always reinforcing. There's something in the Bitcoin space that is called Megasley. Please remind me. It has completely run out of my head. The rebalance, the mining, difficulty adjustment.
Oh, difficulty.
Yes. So difficulty adjustment is a principle where there's an average time for a Bitcoin block to be mined, but whenever people are trying to overdo it or to over leverage their resources to mine blocks, it gets harder. When those resources are pulled back, it gets easier. So it introduces a concept of, regardless of how you can't win in the Bitcoin space by throwing resources at it. You can't win in the Bitcoin space by pushing with a lot of energy. It's just the right energy at the right time for the longest time. That is why the Bitcoin calendar is known up until when all the Bitcoin will be mined, because there's unexpected amount of energy that will be spent for that certainty to happen. So it's like praying to God. The moment you pray, you know that God has granted you. The only thing you can't fast track is the patience. So that concept as well, it's like the moment you pray, you know your Father in heaven has granted you what you want. But you have to wait for the appointed time.
I love it. Absolutely. Wow. Many, many truth bombs. Wow. You really, I've never heard of, you're right. You know, I look at the U.S. Constitution. It was a framework to create humility at a group level. And Bitcoin has effectively created kind of a next generation of code that defends, I know what like our original founding fathers wanted, which was to decentralize that power. It also recognized that us humans are going to try to always shortcut the system, right? And so, but again, it also reinforces this critical value that I think most of us understand I believe it's God's principle to love your neighbor as yourself, that it's a self-defeating prophecy if we don't respect that core rule. And that leads me actually to, and I love what you, rules without rulers, because rulers implicitly want to get not humble and make it about them. And then, but what's interesting is if our rulers, because we all have them, would step back and realize, look, a good ruler will rise the tide for all ships to include themselves. So stay decentralized, stay humble. And that's why, you know, the verse that comes to mind is Jesus says, those who are last will be first. So, you know, I really feel Bitcoin can be an empowering tool for politicians. So I wanted to ask you guys, you know, I think we're kind of at time, but, you know, I'm personally nervous that Bitcoin, that folks want to try to hijack it, big tech or authoritarian governments, that the incumbent incentives of the incumbent system is so big, so strong, that they want to protect themselves. What do you, what would you tell leaders? How would you encourage leaders? You know, I admire the United States where we want to create the strategic Bitcoin reserve. We have policy. We haven't put any money into it, I think. How do you encourage political leaders to embrace Bitcoin, to strengthen their community, to strengthen themselves? Let's play into their ego a little bit. How do you encourage politicians and leaders to get behind Bitcoin?
I want to quickly steal this opportunity from my boss. Thank you so much. I want to tie something that spilled into my head with a question. There's a story in the Bible all throughout Jesus' existence. Who was the moral authority for the world? It was the Pharisees. the Pharisees were the leaders of the time.
Right.
They were always wrong. They were always wrong for some reason.
Yeah.
Because they had made the word, they had twisted the word to their will,
Yeah.
not to the will of the decentralized person. So if you think about there is something called "thank God for Bitcoin." That statement is "thank God for Bitcoin" to me represents the fact that Bitcoin is a manifestation of God Himself, because majority of us have never interacted with God. Did you just get the book? Yes.
For those that are
That's
Christians
it.
on the audience, this is a wonderful book. This was my red pill moment. A friend of mine, I challenged with, "Hey, this is evil. It's dark. It's maybe it's the coin of the mark of the beast." And he said, "Well, that's possibly, but why don't you read this book?" And it changed my perspective as a Christian to embrace Bitcoin. Anyhow, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so what I was trying to say, the rule without rulers, if you think about the word and the way God has manifested into our lives, and even in all the other faiths, it is the belief of a higher power that we all can't control, but we can serve. And Bitcoin manifests itself as a higher form of monetary system that allows us to serve fully, to benefit from its purity. I would like to say it like that. That doesn't mean that politicians or countries like the US will try to position themselves to take advantage of it. But for me, what I would like to remind everyone who would want to take advantage of it is the Pharisees in the Bible were the authorities of the world. But when the Son of God was on earth, they were always proven to be wrong. And indeed, all the time that the Pharisees asked questions from God, they learned a different perspective. Now, some of them resisted, and that is how we get to the crucifixion of God. They resisted to believe what He was trying to teach them. But others actually took on and understood what He was saying. So this whole idea of we always have control as human beings, we sometimes have to get back to our roots and realize this earth did not just appear out of a stone and we did not evolve from monkeys. There is a higher power, and I feel Bitcoin is the closest we get to the financial alignment of how we represent value to that higher power, whatever it is, for whatever religion you come from. There is, for my non-Christian friends, those who are Muslims, there is a very good friend of mine called Muslim Bitcoiner. He's on Twitter. He has a Bitcoin is halal. And the same principles that we, the Christians, learn from Bitcoin, there's an equal representation, as you would good in both religions, in the Islam world as well. So for me, there is a thread that I wanted to connect when it comes to authority and how those rules manifest in Bitcoin. But for the exact question, the advice to politicians, me, I'm only a servant of Bitcoin. This man is the boss. So I'm hoping he can give a response to that particular question.
I don't. That's taking advantage of humility, maybe, to kick it to you, Megasley.
Brindon, this thing you do is not good, bro. He took the time to actually explain it very well, and then still allowed me. It's more like giving me a chance to add something to it, but then he still called me a boss on top of that. Bro, come on. But yeah, I think politicians, when it comes to politicians generally, please a minute. When it comes to politicians, I personally like saying that humility and politicians cannot really
in the same sentence.
I'm telling you, it's very rare for you to see politicians that exhibit that humility. And it all still boils down to what Brindon actually just explained, that the more power they get, the more they tend to lose. If someone was humble before, you give them the power, you give them the money, it's really, really hard to bring them back to that level of humility they were before they got to that stage. But to me, in terms of talking to them, I know politicians lie a lot, especially when they are trying to get something from the people. But I also know that a lot of them, in most of the things they like saying, they like to talk about transparency, and of course, thinking it as a way of, if you're a politician and you're being put into a certain place, you have to understand that you are there to serve the people, basically. And if you're serving the people, it means the people should be your priority. And if the people are your priority, then anything in general that would bring good to the people, you should be in support of it, no matter how. And then Bitcoin is one of those things that we know for certain that is impactful to the people, that is impactful to individuals, especially in this part of the world generally. So if you, as a politician, you know about this, and then you're still resisting or preventing the people from getting access to these impacts, then I don't know exactly what to say about that. But generally, I would encourage them to at least take a step. I mean, because I think the biggest fear they usually have is anything that would anything that kind of like stands like a challenge to their power, or something that threatens their power generally. And most of them see Bitcoin as something that threatens the power they have. Most politicians and people in power generally, because as you know, when you have control over the financial system, or you have control over money, it seems like you have control over people generally. And if you take the power out of their hands, it's not something that they would definitely feel very good about. So I would encourage them not to actually think of Bitcoin as something that is coming to take power out of their hands. They should take away that fear and then just go deeper, try to learn about Bitcoin generally, understand why it was created, because at the end of the day, what differentiates Bitcoin from every other currency or cryptocurrency that is out there is the why of which it was created. And I remember when you talked about humility and when Brandon was speaking, and it just got me thinking about Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin. I don't think there's anybody as humble as Satoshi is. I mean, when you talk about humility, that is the biggest form of humility you can see. Building something for the people and not willing to take credits for it, you understand? And also letting it go for the people to control. I think that is how politicians should start thinking. You are there to serve the people. You're there to provide helping hands to the people you are serving. Then try as much as possible not to withhold anything that would bring impact to their life. Let go of the fear, get into Bitcoin, learn more about it, study more. I think in the process of studying and learning, in both our stories, my story and that of Brandon, we discovered that what actually make a difference is that we both at some point got to learn about Bitcoin, and by learning, we got to realize what we did not know about it initially, and that kind of like shaped and changed our perspective entirely. So that's the same advice I would give to them. Learn about Bitcoin, get some books on Bitcoin, go into the rabbit hole, and then you get to understand what it really is and how helpful it is to humans. So yeah, that is it.
Outstanding response. That to remind our politicians, they're there to serve the people. And I would argue that Bitcoin gives power to a politician, which they all love, but to the servant leader politician. And I love what you said. Learn about it. Don't be afraid of it. Get back to I think most in democratically run organizations, they do have everyone begins with a heart to serve. And they just again, I think we're all at risk of being corrupted. I also wanted to quickly just state for the audience, several times you mentioned getting sats. So for the audience, sats are satoshis, which is one Bitcoin is broken into 1,000,000 satoshis, right? So it's kind of like cents.
100 million.
100 million.
100 million. Sorry. I need to study better too. You guys have been fantastic. You guys are inspiring to me. Real quick, what are the first steps our listeners can take today to start realizing the fulfillment of the positive vision? You guys have kind of created a postcard of the future. What's the first step? Oh, and by the way, I think you guys are modeling what politicians needs to be. Is you learned the benefit of Bitcoin on Yuan, and now you're serving your local communities. You're creating your own circular economies. You're creating these education places. So I think you guys are the model. I hope any politician who knows where these podcasts goes will say, hey, we want to clone that. We want to help more people understand this empowerment. How can our listeners, what's the first steps they can take today? What do you recommend? How do you recommend for people to start learning and getting into Bitcoin and strengthening their own community? What do you recommend? Brindon, why don't you go first?
The easiest way to learn Bitcoin is to use it.
Okay, awesome. So use it.
When you use like just type. Everyone has access to ChatGPT right now. ChatGPT probably has access to your location. After you type this prompt, turn off your location because ChatGPT having your location is not helpful. But ask ChatGPT, how do I buy myself $10 worth of Bitcoin right now? It will teach you in however way, but work backwards of that, what you learn. Because I could tell you to go look for a course. I could send you to the Bitcoin Standard, which is a very good book. I could send you to all these resources online that would do you justice, but there's nothing that has worked, in my experience, building a circular economy than having someone use Bitcoin. The other option that I know Megasley might be shy to tell you about is on his website, there is something where you can learn and you'll get your first Bitcoin. So it's a win-win. He can explain more what that looks like, whereby they've created a course. I'm hoping this is the course he created. He created something for. On African Bitcoiners, you can go to the learn part and you would be able to see the different ways you can learn. So, Megasley, please.
Always putting me on the spot, bro. Okay. I think Brindon has said it. The easiest way to actually learn about Bitcoin is using it. And I think it's cut across everything. The easiest way to learn about anything is actually doing or using or getting into that thing, actually getting your hands dirty, right? And for the learning resource is talking about, so we have a Bitcoin for Beginners course on the website. Right. I did not create the course. This was all Sarah White. So shout out to Sarah. So this is actually a course that is broken down to the simplest, to its simplest form. And it also carries African perspective in mind, basically. So the idea is actually to help people that do not really know about Bitcoin, and help them learn from the very, very roots, from the basics of what Bitcoin is, all the way to where they are able to earn their first Bitcoin and how they are able to choose the right wallet and also save in Bitcoin as well too. So that's more like a summary of what the course is. It is a 21 days for beginners, Bitcoin for Beginners course that runs over email. We're actually working on a beta version of this course. I think we'll be releasing it, if not late next month. It's going to be early next year. So that's when it's going to be an interactive course and it will be way, way, way better than this. So yeah, that is it. In terms of earning Bitcoin for the course, initially when we started, we actually did it in such a way that we were paying people to learn about Bitcoin. And how did we do that? We have this course that is running. And if you go through the course for, the 21 days, and then you take the final quiz, and then you're able to pass, get up to 70% on the final quiz. And then we give you your first 10,000 satoshis, which is currently worth around approximately $10. Let's just say $10 worth of Bitcoin as your first Bitcoin. So basically, we were paying people to learn about Bitcoin. But then along the line, human beings, being human beings, generally, they always try to take advantages of things like that. We saw people signing up with multiple emails, taking the final quiz just to rip us of those satoshis. One person could sign up with like 20, 30 different emails, and then, and that, because of that, we decided to stop giving out those sats. And because obviously, as Bitcoin enforces proof of work, you have to do some certain level of work before you're able to, you should be able to receive some form of reward. So that's the way they were doing it, kind of like took that away. And now we are no longer paying people to take the course. But there are other things we actually do on the site. There are lots of things on the website teaching people where they can earn their first Bitcoin if they are interested, if they don't want to buy. And if they want to buy, we also have guides too on where and how they can buy their first Bitcoin. So yeah, that's it.
You guys are awesome. I'm going to highlight on the screen here a couple of resources. So there's Bitcoiners.Africa, amazing. Next week is the Africa Bitcoin Conference. I think you both going to be there in Mauritius. And then what I'm really excited about is this Adopting Bitcoin conference, where you actually can go and spend time. There's a satellite event called the African Bitcoin Circular Economy Summit, and then a road trip where you can go visit these circular economies and see firsthand how how they're basically building economies kind of from the ground up. And I think those who've been on the podcast before or listened to it, I personally have a big concern with how in Europe and in America they're gone. There's no more artisans. Can these circular economies be a way that we can bring back dinosaurs, bring back artisans, the tradespeople that are the butchers, the florists, and kind of that have been killed by the corporate oligarchies? Unfortunately, America looks a lot more like communism than I think it likes to admit, with the big tech oligarchies. And so it's wonderful watching how, Brindon, there with the orphanages, you kind of revitalize some of these local communities. So hopefully that'll transfer to Europe as well. And then this is Brindon's company, Gorilla.Sash. Go on a safari with Brindon, pay with Bitcoin and learn about Bitcoin. And then this is free routing, which Megasley talked about. You covered on. We'll let our audience, because we're out of time, search what Lightning Network is. Actually, Megasley, go ahead and take 30 seconds and try to explain what the Lightning Network is and why it's important.
Yeah, so the Lightning Network is basically just a scaling solution that was built on top of Bitcoin. It's more like a layer 2 solution, and its major aim is scalability. So with the normal Bitcoin on chain, if you've ever made a Bitcoin transaction before, you see it takes approximately 10 minutes for a confirmation to happen. And that can take some time. Sometimes it could take more than that, but it's designed to take approximately 10 minutes for it to happen. And because of that, that limits the amount of transactions that can happen per second to around 3 to just 7 transactions per second, which cannot be competitive when you talk about the current or existing financial payment system that are there.
We may have lost Megasley, but I'll keep going. Brindon, I think you got me here. One of the last things we love for everyone to share is, at a personal level, Brindon, what is your favorite daily habit of humility?
every day I have to remind myself through a run that I have not yet become a pro at running, and it's been 5 years of running. Every day that I try to run, I find difficulty. And every day when I run in the morning, I go through that day feeling humble. So for me, physical fitness definitely takes me there. It's that challenging lifestyle. It's the one.
That's awesome, Brindon. So physical fitness is kind of the thing that keeps you humble, is your daily habit of humility. And Megasley, if you're there, it looks like you got the internet is down. Let's see, you there? Let's see if we got if you've come back and you can hear us. Oh, that's okay. It was great though. I think he got the Lightning Network explanation out. Megasley.
Or he just lost power. There's a whole chance, because it's dark, there's a whole chance that he lost power.
I think so. Let's see. Megasley, I think we're going to have to wrap up without you, brother. I'm really sorry. Let's see, Megasley, one more chance. We were asking Brindon, what is his favorite daily habit of humility? If you can chat it to us, I'll speak it for you. All's good. I think we're great, guys. I really appreciate both of you. Y'all inspire me. May God bless you. And thanks again for enjoying the Empowering Humility podcast. This is the longest one we've ever done, by the way. So congratulations. But I think it is my favorite. With no offense to the past hosts.
No, thank you for having us. It's really been a great conversation. I think I'm looking forward to coming back.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we look forward to our marketing guys. They do a great job of doing outtakes, and we will make sure that we share it with you so you can share it too. Thanks again for embodying empowering humility, and have an amazing evening.
You too, sir. Thank you so much.